Hello and welcome to another short educational video from New Century Planning. My name is Bob Ryerson. I'm the founder of New Century, and I'm pleased to have with me today Alan Johnson. Alan is the president and founder of SDIC Services, which is a company that helps people research and work with self-directed IRAs. And you have a lot of experience in the field, so I'm happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Bob.
So Alan, let's start out, and just in case people don't know, we've heard this phrase self-directed IRAs. I know you lean away from that, but can you tell us, how would we define a self-directed IRA in your view?
Sure. Self-directed IRA, the term itself is a misnomer. It's literally any IRA that you have is self-directed.
Okay.
But it's come to be known in the industry as an IRA that is invested in a private offering. Most people believe that, for whatever reason, that their IRA investments are limited to
Stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, publicly
traded securities. But there is no IRS regulation against that. And in fact, you can, subject to certain IRS restrictions, you can invest your IRA easily into private offerings, and which is what the majority of people with self-directed IRAs do.
So a little bit of a misnomer, so maybe private investment IRAs is better. I like that. And I know from many years of reading that the big endowments and pensions have plenty of money outside of publicly traded securities. They have alternative investments, and
Yes.
that's on purpose. One of the concerns, as we sit here in the spring of 23, who knows, but if we go through what they call a lost decade, there are times historically when paper assets don't perform for 5 or 10 or 15 years, or the opposite, real estate or whatever. So it's good that people can diversify through the self-directed IRAs into these private offerings that are not publicly traded paper. Let me ask you, in terms of the scope, what are some possibilities? I've heard, and I would like you to confirm, not that it's that simple all the time, but you could own franchises and private equity and private debt and real estate and precious metals and cryptos. You can own almost anything that the IRS approves in an IRA. Or a Roth IRA.
Yes, and the IRS approves, the IRS doesn't approve or disapprove of any investment.
Okay.
But there are certain restrictions.
Okay.
You cannot invest your IRA into an S corporation, and that's really because part of setting up an S corporation is you're restricted that retirement accounts cannot invest in an S corporation. So therefore, an IRA cannot invest in an S corporation.
Okay.
Second area is you cannot buy life insurance on yourself with a IRA account.
Okay.
And third, you cannot invest in art or collectibles. So you can't invest in a classic automobile.
Okay.
But having said that, and you mentioned a very good point, is there are investment opportunities if you feel that you're an art aficionado or you know something about cars. You could invest in an art gallery as a going business.
Mm-hmm.
You could invest in a car dealership that specializes in classic automobiles.
Okay. So
but you can't have the actual collectible yourself in your IRA account.
So there's some restrictions, but it sounds pretty broad. I mean, pretty much any type of real estate, physical precious metals,
Yes.
Cryptocurrencies, racehorses, franchises. I think a lot of people are not aware of that. And I think it's interesting because, who knows, but if we do hit a situation where maybe we have higher inflation for the next 10, 15 years than we had a really nice run, maybe these non-paper assets do better, and it's important for people to have these. Maybe this is the only thing that works really well. We don't know. But I think it's interesting that a lot of people, A, are unaware of it, and B, wouldn't know how. So let's talk about the how. If they're all in paper and the paper is not so good, this is a breath of fresh air for them that they can have these different types of investments and do some research. What would you say, how would somebody get started? What are some of the mechanics? How many alternative or private investment IRA custodians are out there? These are IRS approved custodians, obviously.
They are, yes. And I'll speak to the IRS approval in just a bit. It starts out with, fundamentally, you could have Schwab, Fidelity, any of the large brokerage firms could custody a self-directed IRA, or that is an IRA that holds a private investment, but they don't. And the reason they don't...
They moved away from that 10, 15 years ago. Yeah.
They did, because the record keeping is very onerous. In some cases, they could subject themselves to more government scrutiny and regulatory requirements. But the bottom line is they are set up to handle stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And so their IRA, what they basically say is, we choose not to custody these other investments. We will custody stocks, bonds, mutual funds.
Easy peasy for them, yeah.
So that leaves the self-directed IRA custodians that are out there, of which there are approximately 40. And it involves, they are, essentially all of them are regulated by state regulators.
Okay.
The most common state, I believe, is South Dakota, that IRA custodian will be regulated through the South Dakota Banking Organization. Other states, there are other states that custodians will choose for one reason or another, but it's the bank regulators in these specific states
that regulate
the IRA custodians. That has a bearing in some of the types of investments that you can make, such as cannabis. There is nothing inherently restrictive about holding a cannabis investment in an IRA account, but you've got to find a custodian that will hold the cannabis investment, and that custodian many times is going to be limited by what the state regulator says they can hold.
Okay. That's really diversifying.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the mechanics. Does somebody just go to they do research, they go to a website and they open an account, same as usual?
They can. And now we start getting into a little bit of what I do. As I mentioned earlier, there's 40 custodians out there. As I mentioned, not all custodians will hold all investments.
Right.
There are prohibited transactions that the IRS has in place, so that just because your investment is not in an S corporation, life insurance, or a collectible, you might still be precluded from holding it because of prohibited transaction rules, which basically say that you can't invest in your wife's business or self-dealing types of prohibited transactions. So the very first question, backing up, is if you want to make a private investment, the first thing you have to address is, number one, is there a restriction from the IRS regulations that prevent you from holding it?
Okay.
Number two, will the custodian hold it out of these 40 or so? And then number three is the custodian really any good at holding the investment?
Okay. So there's three kind of pieces of research that go into.
Exactly.
In other words, I'm imagining you're going to tell me that some of these alternative IRA custodians are better at real estate or private equity or precious metals than others. They're not all the same. They have different strengths and different preferences and nuances.
Right. Generally, I would say you can think of maybe 4 asset classes: precious metals, and again, not collectible metals. In other words, you can't own the
numismatic coins.
Numismatic
Well,
coins.
you can own gold and silver and platinum and palladium bars and coins. Yeah.
Yes, certain precious metal types, bullion and coins, are approved. Secondly is real estate. That's a huge asset class, the direct ownership of real estate. So we're talking about anything from an individual purchasing a house to rent out. And here what they're looking for is capital appreciation on the property down the road, and also a steady stream of net cash flow from rental income that comes in. Very common type of investment. Then third would probably be private equity, and then fourth would be private lending. Private lending is starting to pick up. Interest rates, as you know, have been going up. So people can be the bank if they want and loan money. That has the advantage if they can get past the credit worthiness of the person or individual or company they're lending to, has the advantage of sustainable interest repayment on the loan.
Right. I've heard that a little more difficult, but if you wanted to own condos on the beach in Costa Rica in some project, that's actually doable as well. A little more complicated, but.
And you bring up international investing.
Right.
There's nothing that prohibits international investing.
That's nice.
That having been said, there's really only a few custodians that will hold or are any good at holding an international
Just to your point, know who you're dealing with, right?
Yeah, know who you're dealing with, exactly.
But I think it's important that people open their minds to, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people watching are unaware that these things are available as IRA investments. If somebody has a big IRA and it's all in paper, and the government's destroying the paper value over time, this might be a wise diversification, even if it's a small chunk.
Exactly, and there's reasons behind that.
Sure.
Private investments, by their very nature, there are SEC regulations that you have to be careful, and you just can't go out willy-nilly tooting your own horn saying,
Yeah.
hey, I'm setting up a real estate syndication and I'm taking all comers to come in and invest in this. There are SEC exemptions, but you have to be very careful about how you
Sure.
set up your offering so that you're not in violation of these regulations that the SEC has established.
Let me ask you this. We know that the big brokerage custodians don't charge any fees. It's very convenient, but they only do a couple things. So we know from experience, our clients, even if they have a lot of money, they complain about the fees with the alternative investment IRAs.
Yes.
And, it's $200, $300, $400, $500 a year, and it's $30, $40 a month. And it annoys them. But I think we have to remember, first of all, their cable TV bill's $150 or $250, so this is $30 a month. And it allows them, I guess what we struggle is to convince them, hey, pay it because you have some holdings here that are very different. They may outperform. They're a diversification. I think, can you speak to the fee situation? I mean, these people are doing record keeping and research and other reporting that's not easy peasy at 4 o'clock close every day like Schwab and Fidelity and Vanguard, and hence they have to get paid. Right?
And that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. It's easy to custody publicly traded assets because they mark to market
Every day.
Every day.
Here you go.
And one of the IRS regulations is that December 31st of every year, the custodian has to report a fair market value for the investment.
Sometimes it's harder to do for private equity and real estate and.
Exactly. It's easy with precious metals, and you'll often
Sure.
see that the fee structure that IRA custodians will charge for precious metals is considerably less than
the
it
real
is
estate or
for
private equity. That
Yes,
makes
because
sense.
the record keeping requirements are so much easier for precious metals.
So we've said there's maybe three dozen or more of these custodians. They're not all like. You have a great new app coming out shortly. Can you explain what your services are and what that app can do for people who are interested in this field?
Yeah, largely what I do, having had worked for two self-directed IRA custodians over a number of years, I got to see a lot of the pain points that clients feel. And so when I left the most recent custodian I worked for, I decided to open up a business, SDIC Services, that was devoted to helping people to select the right IRA custodian, avoid the pitfalls, and then if a problem occurs, act as their advocate because I know exactly how the business model of an IRA custodian.
You know all the internal mechanics and problems and stuff, yeah.
And I know a lot of the key decision makers at a lot of the custodial firms, so I can act as an advocate on their behalf when
Nice.
they run into a question or an issue. So, speaking to this app I'm developing, I have a piece of software, a system, that has all of the fee structures of all 40 custodians.
Nice.
These fee structures, no two are exactly alike, and some will nickel and dime for various things to speak to some of the complaints that arise from dealing with custodians. The fees can be all over the place. In fact, surprisingly, the fee difference between the most expensive custodian and the least expensive custodian can differ by a factor of 10.
Wow.
Now, we're talking about, for the same service, you might pay, say, anywhere from $300 a year to $3,000 a year. Depending on how much you're investing, you may not care one way or another, but most people, a $2,700 a year per difference is real money,
Right.
and it's money that comes out generally
Of the account. Which is not great. Yeah.
and so you're losing the growth potential of that
Of all that money. Right?
of all that money.
It sounds like a very valuable service. What else is the app going to do besides going to do a fee comparison? I imagine
Does a fee
also strengths
comparison.
and weaknesses of
It will-
offerings.
Yeah, yes. So when I talk to people, there's about a 20-question interview. I go in and talk to Bob, what do you want to invest in, and how do you think the cash is going to flow in and out of the investment? Because all of these things impact the fees that you might
You're gonna
pay
choose, yeah.
with a particular custodian. So we look at, first of all, the easy one is we look at whether or not the investment can be held in the IRA, make sure that there's not one of these lurking prohibited transactions. Secondly, we determine which custodians will hold the asset, and you will get a report on those. Out of those 40, here are the 35, let's say.
And are they any good at it?
And number three, are they any good at it?
Do they do a lot of them? Yeah.
And the best way to gauge whether they're any good at it is, at present, I have some proprietary algorithms that I use, but at present, you simply go out to Google or Yelp, or you look at your review. And frankly, I would recommend that anybody considering any IRA custodian do a review search. You will invariably read some horror stories.
Sure.
And those horror stories should not be there. Either the client didn't fully understand what they were getting into when they got into this, or else the custodian doesn't really understand their clients enough
or they have some service issues or something.
Yes, exactly. So I'm putting together a clearinghouse of sorts where we're going to automate all of this. My target release date is July 1, and you can go out to the website, and for a very affordable fee, you would be able to answer these interview questions and get a listing of the custodians that might be a good starting point for you.
I also think that your services are going to be more in demand. I have a questionable view. You know, we just had a fantastic 20, 30-year run in paper assets. If we hit a situation where they're not as good, or if people just want to diversify, and they're becoming aware that these different choices are available, then, you know, those three big steps that you said, that they're important, and it's great. Well, listen, thank you so much. I appreciate all the information, and I think private investment IRAs are really a valuable alternative for people.
Thanks for that. Let's coin that term here. I like
Very
that.
good.
I like that.
Let's copyright. Great. Thank you.
Okay.